Hello everybody, my name is Zoe and I'm here with my partners Renee, Olivia, Wanley, and we are Life on Land. Life on Land as a sustainable development goal is unique and intersects a variety of issues that we hope to highlight for you today. In short, this goal aims to protect, restore, and promote the sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems and halt biodiversity loss. How this goal takes form in an urban public sphere is of interest today. Next slide. The problem that we have identified is that there is a deficit of underground green space in the TTC, thus limiting the sustainable creation and use of the city's terrestrial ecosystems. This effect is compounded by dangerous air quality levels on public transit. Next slide. This is a public health problem, a mental health problem, and a community problem. So let's first talk about mental health. All of the time that someone spends on the subway is time spent that you are not interacting with nature and biodiversity. Although it is clear from a Toronto public health report that identified levels of fine particulate matter air pollution, particularly on line 2, that are high enough to warrant mitigation, including aerosols, smokes, fumes, dust, and ash, although it is clear from that statement that this has a negative impact on our physical health, this also impacts our mental health. Because, as Olivia will further elaborate on, exposure to green space in your day-to-day life has been studied as a mechanism for improving quality of life. We talked about public health and mental health, now let's talk about community. Pre-pandemic daily ridership on the TTC was 1.8 million people. That figure has since fallen to approximately 300,000 people, and it is not expected to recover for at least another year. What this pandemic has reinforced for our project, however, is that the TTC now more than ever exists to serve some of Toronto's poorest and most vulnerable communities, often including people like our Century grocery store workers. So how do we fix this problem for them? To that, I turn it over to my friend Olivia.
Our proposed solution is a pilot green wall that will be installed in Toronto's TTC Union Station. The proposed design, as modeled on the slide in front of you, will provide a much-needed air filtration service through biofilters that will filter out particulate matter in the surrounding air, thus cleaning it. Next slide, please. While we understand that it's not intuitive that plants would grow well underground, there are many species of plants that have properties that would make them well suited for this project. The two plants on the slide in front of you, bromeliads and dracania, both require little natural light, little water, and little maintenance while still having air cleaning properties. Next slide. What makes our project unique is its innovative approach to solving our highlighted problem. This innovation can be seen through 4 main categories: air quality, mental health, ecology, and aesthetics. Firstly, for air quality, due to particulate matter in the TTC, mitigation is clearly needed, and the TTC and Metrolink have done very little to address this. Our pilot green wall addresses this head on. Secondly, for mental health, a University of Vienna study found that students' exposure to green spaces on a daily basis reduces stress and promotes relaxation. Our project essentially takes these findings and amplifies it citywide. As for ecology, there are currently no underground green spaces in the TTC or PATH. In fact, there are no public underground green spaces in the world at all. So our pilot project is the first step to promote biodiversity in an underground system. And lastly, for aesthetics, the TTC has never been known for being a particularly beautiful system, and our project will address this head on. The City of Toronto has also called 2021, the year that we plan on installing the green wall, to be the year of public art, which would be highly advantageous for the installation of our project and in getting sponsors. Next slide, please. We decided on this project's particular location for many reasons. First of all, why we would want to put it underground. Downtown Toronto is famous for its complex and unique underground systems that are integral to daily life in Toronto. And further on that, why the TTC? The TTC is the most widely used underground system in Toronto, so our pilot project will reach the most people than say it would on the PATH. And why Union Station? We thought, though the goal is to install green spaces in all TTC stations, Union Station is a great place for our pilot project. Last year, Union Station had over 250,000 daily passengers and is a focal point for Toronto, considering its connection to the Via Rail system, the GO Train system, and the UP Express. Union also has a public-private ownership that would be particularly useful in the installation of this project. Lastly, why this intervention? We connect all these benefits in a way that addresses health concerns, community concerns, while creating a profit that Renee will detail for you on the coming slides. Thank you.
Awesome. So what we're looking in terms of budget for our pilot project, we hope to use the $5,000 directly towards building our prototype. And so roughly $3,000 would go towards the green wall, which consists of plants, soil, and supplementary nutrients, while $2,000 would go towards the biofilter, and this consists of an air filtration system. We haven't considered the cost in terms of maintenance and installation, which consists of watering, changing soil, and repairing if damaged, as this is something that is subject to change depending on the type of partnership. We are looking at a private-public partnership, and this is something that these owners would take on as their own costs. Obviously, however, we do want to make this project something that is scalable. And so we have developed further sources of funding outside of this initial $5,000. We've created a sponsorship program which would allow private, public, and civil society investors to purchase a tile at the cost of production. This would allow them to mimic an idea of decreasing their carbon footprint, but would also allow them to contribute to their community. We'd be able to grow the green walls with their purchasing of these tiles, but also it would be able to demonstrate cities as well as private, public, and civil society investors in terms of their commitment to sustainability. We hope that we'd be able to continue to grow these green walls, and having all of these investors would help do that beyond our own initial money. And so looking at this project from a broader scale, we obviously wanted to consider key stakeholders as well as completing a couple risk assessments. And so we reached out to people that we thought would be interested but also affected by our project. And this includes the City of Toronto, the Toronto Financial District, as well as we reached out to the Global Risk Observatory. And through these consultations, we discussed the geography of the project, its novelty, as well as its societal impacts. And we hope that we have been able to address all of the concerns, risks, but also interest that we got from all of our feedback. And we hope that we are able to address that within this project. So I'll hand it over to Wan Lee to discuss the timeline of our pilot project and how we hope to ensure its success.
So there are 3 stages to the project, and the first phase will be consultation, which will be running from September until the end of the year. So when it comes to consultation, it will be consultation for the prototype, where we are working towards the planning for the actual installation of the prototype. Since mentioned, Union Station is privately and publicly owned, so the consultation will be in the form of discussion with relevant public and private stakeholders to determine the extent of the joint collaboration. Phase 2 will be running from the start of next year until around March, and it will be working towards installing the actual wall to ensure that it's actually functioning. Phase 3 will be ongoing monitoring and evaluation to determine if the wall is actually addressing the problems that we are targeting, according to the next slide, which is the 3 main metrics of success. So firstly, installation and maintenance. So this looks like monitoring the conditions of the wall and the filter to ensure that they are working towards their function. Secondly, users' experience. This looks like different social media coverage in the form of Facebook or Instagram platform, different surveys to indicate the user's experience with the wall, for instance, if they're enjoying the new addition, and also community involvement to decide if the sponsorship program is actually feasible in the long run. And thirdly, air quality report. We think that air quality is an explicit quantitative variable that we are measuring, and there are already existing instruments to measure air quality. So we think we can look at things like the Toronto Annual Public Health, air quality report, as a sort of baseline to measure any sort of changes and improvement in air quality since the installation of the wall. And we think these are 3 clear metrics of success that we can use to measure the extent and progress of our project. And I'll hand it over to Zoe.
Okay, so what have we done for you today? First, we have identified an interrelated problem, the fact that there is a deficit of underground green space and dangerous air quality in the TTC. Second, we have identified an intuitive and innovative solution, the addition of a green wall biofilter in TTC stations, starting with a pilot project in Union Station. We strongly believe in the feasibility of this intervention, as demonstrated through our budget, our funding schemes, and dynamic feedback mechanisms. But more importantly, we strongly believe in the merit of this intervention. Our intervention is unique in that the pandemic has actually created added value for its deliverables. The TTC is not going away. It is an essential service, and this is the moment where we can intervene to help it best evolve to best suit the communities it serves. But more than that, we want to stress again that this can be more than just a biofilter. The Green Wall biofilter has the ability and power to be an example of Toronto's public art and beauty. It can be a mechanism to provide peace for TTC riders on long commutes, but it can also contribute to making people who are taking the TTC and getting back into restarting our lives as they once were feel more safe in a world that progressively feels less so. So thank you for paying attention. We are Life on Land.
Thank you. Um, Good presentation, and I noticed that all of the slides have shades of green in them. So,
But can I interrupt you for 1 second? Just to keep us all on time, can I ask all the judges to ask one question for the students? Remind the students just to take notes. So don't answer the judges after the one question, and then come back at the end of the 4 judges and respond. Thank you.
okay, so then I have like 7 questions, but I'll ask one of them. When you talked about, I'm glad that you talked about scalability. When you talked about scalability, that sponsorship can be done by tile, but who would actually overall, when this is scaled up, be responsible for maintaining, etc.? What organization will be taking over pulling all of these sponsors together?
So first of all, again, thanks for all the work you've put into this, and particularly for coming up with something that I had never thought about even as a consideration to have this in the subway system. I got to say, with Jennifer Keesmet on the call, I feel like I shouldn't say a word and just wait to see what she has to say about this. I'm very curious on that front, given how much she's thought about all of these questions. But I think the one question I have for your team is, one of the principles we work off of at Audacious Futures is this idea of fall in love with the problem, not your solution. And so I'm really curious about, for the given problem you've chosen to address within the SDG framework, where does this kind of a solution rank from an effectiveness perspective? So are we doubling down on the goal or on the tool and saying, this is interesting, let's go find a problem for it? Or is it truly one of the highest leverage points to address this problem at scale in a meaningful way? When there are so many problems we need to solve for the population, how does this solution rank from an effectiveness and relevance perspective? That would be my.
Great. Well, I'll actually pick up on Hamoon's question and slip in another very, very simple one. But just picking up on Hamoon's question, I didn't see any explanation of at what scale this biofilter wall would need to be in order to actually have an impact on air quality, which is the objective. But, do you need to, does it need to be every wall in the entire subway station in order for it to begin to impact the air quality? I don't know. So I'm just picking up on that question of the relationship between the problem, and I think you've identified an absolutely critical problem. And a lot of us spend a lot of time below grade. An absolutely critical problem, but the scale of the solution to actually have an impact is an outstanding question for me. So that's just picking up on the previous question. My real question is, you kind of positioned this as something that was a private-public partnership and like there was a financial model. And what I look at this and I see it as a public good that has a cost. And just like the transit system itself, there's no financial model for transit systems. Financial models are a cost. They have a whole series of public benefits, and that's why we invest in them, but they have a cost. And so I just wanted to raise this question of, if it's a pure public good, like parks cost us money, but we know they have public benefits, so we build parks. And it could be that this fits into that same category, but you seem to allude to there being a financial model for this. And I just don't see that you presented that, and I don't see that that's true. Doesn't mean it's not a legitimate thing to do, but it means it needs to be, I would say, framed in a more straightforward way.
My questions are all sort of amalgamations also of what everyone has said here already as well. As someone who's built many a green wall in my day, I can say that there are a lot of considerations in terms of the maintenance, and low light is not the same as no light. And there are a couple of other things in terms of bug maintenance, mold control, all kinds of other things that have to be considered here. So again, wondering about the long-term maintenance and scalability of this thing. Same question as Jennifer, like really, how do we get it to a scale that it actually is making real tangible impact in the air quality? And then again, as sort of the sponsorship professional on this panel, I looked at the tile by tile sales strategy, and I'm very confused, especially when you show your costs. The amount of effort that it takes to do a bunch of little individual sales versus one significant sale, which I would actually deem even the cost of one of these things based on what you're showing as quite insignificant in terms of cost. What was the rationality around that? And again, as Yaprov said, like, who's doing it?
So could I just take a moment to summarize your questions so we can just all make sure we're answering them? We have the first, which is they all kind of blend in together, so we might take turns answering. And the first is scalability in the sponsorship program. The second is, does the solution match kind of the problem? The third is back again to scale and the financial model. And then could you just repeat, could you summarize your question? Jennifer? Just the last, what we should take from you.
Who is doing the selling and management of those clients who you sell these individual tiles to?
Okay, perfect. So I can start off with answering the second question that was asked, and I'm gonna ask my friend Renee to kind of touch on some different metrics to supplement it. So first, the question of, is this solution really matching or fitting the problem? To that, I would say yes. I can understand that this comes off as somewhat flashy. I think that the two main things to drive home to this is that, one, Renee's going to talk about the specific metrics, so how much of the green wall is actually needed to give a significant impact. But I also answer this by saying that there are two really benefits from this intervention. You have one, the air quality, and two, the mental health and just kind of general appearance benefit. And I think that because air quality is measurable and distinct, we focus on that and we kind of look away from just creating pretty environments and nice environments that we're surrounded by. But as someone who's taken the TTC every single day for most of my life, to and from school, to and from parents' house, I actually think contributing to more than just the air quality and actually fixing and making a location that feels at home and feels comfortable is very important. And a lot of the work that we've talked about in relation to mental health describes this kind of sense of urban green poverty that a lot of people in some of like marginalized communities in this city especially are not exposed to green. And so I urge you to kind of think about it within that frame. And I also stress that that's an added benefit. And now, because I've said it 3 times, I'm going to ask Renee to talk about the specific metrics which help the air quality. So Renee.
So with regards to the scale of the impact, I'm just going to switch sides really quickly. And so obviously our long-term vision is to be able to expand it to other TTC stations, but also a bunch of other underground networks such as the Path. And so we're not really able to measure scalability from not having implemented a project, but what we hope to accomplish is reducing the dangerous air quality, but also to be able to expand this idea of underground ecosystems. And so to do that in terms of air quality, what we can measure off of is the minimum efficiency reporting value. And the acronym is MERV. I'll just refer to it as MERV. And so that works on a scale of 1 to 20. And so the level of our ideal filters would be 13. And this is what's used in hospitals and general surgery areas. And so this measurement is based off of type and size of particulate matter. And so we can't necessarily predict how much air would be moving in through a filter. We can't predict how much space will necessarily be there considering the difference in stations. But what we can predict is the strength of a filter and the type of particulate matter that it would be able to filter through. So again, these are things that we'd be looking through the Toronto Public Health Report the year after, which is what we mentioned in our metrics for success. And that's how we would be able to quantify the scalability and the impact of our project. But again, in terms of our long-term vision, in terms of expanding through different stations, which kind of goes into another question, is that we'd obviously be looking at the feasibility of some stations. So the reason we chose Union Station is because it has a large amount of space. Specifically, there is a wall on both sides of the north and south platforms that pushes back, and we're able to use that. However, if you look at stations like St. George, there aren't necessarily many large walls. You feature more columns, and that's where we would come up with a set of difficulties. So we'd want to pilot in somewhere that there is a success rate, and Union kind of looks like the best place to have a success rate. But also it can be adapted. As you can see in this slide, we have it modeled in Bay Station, and the similar columns are there. However, again, it is just much more of a larger space, similar with Bathurst Station. And so in terms of our financial model, it isn't a proven sponsorship program. However, it's one that we think would be able to sustain the project over a long period of time. Who would be managing the sales? I would hope that it is our team, because we hope to be invested in this project for its entirety. And we want to be able to be part of the process in terms of facilitating the selling, as well as the marketing of this project and this initiative. We obviously can't predict who would be interested and who would want to buy it. However, we have reached out, for example, to the business improvement area for Toronto. And we have talked to a bunch of businesses that are operating in the financial district, and they are very interested. The reason why we are looking at a public-private partnership at the moment is because Union is owned both by the TTC, but also by TD. And so that obviously brings complications because it can't only be considered a public good. It's also not necessarily just a private initiative. And so for those reasons, that's why we have been considering making it a joint effort because of the nature of Union, but also because we think that implementing plants underground and expanding ecosystems in Toronto and cleaning air should be something that everyone benefits of, regardless of whether or not you are a private business or you are a public and individual. And so these are the reasons why we've modeled our financial model that way. But also that's kind of how we've been working out the costing of tiles. And so again, for that, this isn't something that exists. We've kind of ballparked, estimated, and discussed with different experts in terms of how much filters cost, how much plants cost, what the ballpark for water and different nutrients would cost, and that's how we built the individual cost of the tile. This can obviously be subject to change, say if one of our investors want them to be larger or to be smaller or to be on the ground as opposed to be on the wall. But that's how we've monitored it, and that's how we hope to move forward. However, again, this is something that is subject to change depending on who we're looking at. So I hope that answers all of their questions.
Thank you, Renee.
Looking at.
Thanks very much. Sorry to cut you guys off like this. It is not